Well, all right, guys, it's now time for our weekly political segment, Texas Face Off. And you can catch it right here on midday every Tuesday at 11:30. So joining us today is Ed Espinoza. He's the Executive Director of Progressive Texas. He has more than 20 years of experience providing strategic communications counsel for 50 campaigns and served as the Western States Director at the Democratic National Committee. And also here with us today is Spencer Davis. He's the new executive director for the Travis County Republican Party. He's also the former data director for the Republican Party of Texas. So, guys, first and foremost, thank y'all so much for being with us. Of course,
good to be here, Spencer. Congratulations on the new job.
Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, guys, you know, lawmakers are back to work for their 140-day session with a new speaker coming in and new lawmakers. This session, public school finance is expected to take center stage, and experts say to make the biggest impact, the state will have to increase how much is spent per child. But even if that happens, education experts say that it's only going to get schools operating at 2016 levels, and they insist Texas has to find new sources of revenue. So just, Ed, I'll go ahead and start with you, what your train of thought is on that.
Yeah, so it's probably the single most important issue in Texas right now is school finance, not just because of the public schools, but because of how it affects property taxes. The property tax formula in Texas funds public schools, but over the years, the state hasn't sent as much money back to the schools that they've collected from property taxes. So this is a problem. I think the state, I don't know these numbers off the top of my head exactly, but I believe the state used to provide 60%. Now they provide 34%, something in that realm. Whatever it is, it's an extreme shift away from what they used to give. And they've shifted that burden to property, to homeowners. Anybody who owns a home knows that this is something that they have to deal with, and they get that bill every year, every quarter, however they get it. So that's something that lawmakers have to take up. And it's a different session this time because the margins between the Democrats and the Republicans is only 8 seats. It's very close. There has to be a lot of negotiating this time.
For sure. And Ed, I'm sorry, and Spencer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Leslie, so the bottom line is that we need to simplify it. So schools need to be more sure when we walk in to the school year how much money they had to spend to accomplish their mission. And I think the governor came out with a great plan in November that not only simplifies the school finance calculation, but it also incentivizes schools to better be able to perform their mission and also keep school costs down. But yeah, it's going to be the story of these first couple of weeks here in the session. The comptroller came out in the last couple of weeks and said this is the side of the equation of how much we have to spend. We have about $119 billion for the next 2 years. And now the legislators are going to decide how that is spent. And the first question is, of course, going to be how much money that gets to schools.
All right, guys, thank y'all so much. And then my next question is something, of course, we talked about a little bit earlier. Of course, the House will be electing a new speaker today, and it's expected to be Republican Dennis Bonnen. And so how do you think he will lead the House?
Well, it's an interesting case. It's the first new speaker in almost a decade. And obviously a Republican being elected with some Democratic support. So going back to what I was saying a moment ago about the margins in the chambers being closer than they have been since 2010, since prior to the 2010 election, this has to be a legislative session that doesn't rely so much on the will of one political party. This has to be one that requires some sort of crossover between the two. I can say that at the beginning of the Texas legislative session, I'm optimistic. I always tend to be an optimist. We'll see what that looks like 140 days from now.
Okay, Spencer?
Of course, yeah, and of course, elections have consequences. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the margin's down to 8 or 9 seats in the House.
I think it's 8 to be even, 9 to switch the majority. That's right.
Yeah. So, I expect there to be more some bipartisanship required, and I think that we're going to find this with this new speaker. He has been in the House since he was 24. He was one of Speaker Strauss's top lieutenants, so he's got a good look at leadership, and I expect the transition will be pretty seamless because of that.
I'll add to that. Democratic Representative Gina Hinojosa from here in Austin said in the Austin Chronicle recently that she found that when she got to the chamber, she found it much easier to be conciliatory and bridge building with Republicans than she had thought it would be, and I think it's going to be even more so this session. At least I hope so.
But yeah, he has his work cut out for him. I mean, there's already, I think, 740 bills filed in the House, so they're going to get started real quick.
All right, guys, thank y'all. And then moving a little, switching over into the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick lost his Republican supermajority. He also had a tight race in the election to win. So how do you think that change, given that change, he'll lead the chamber?
Hard to say. I think that over the years, the Senate used to be the place of high-minded thinking, the place where it was the the chamber known for its great debates and its great, I forget the word I'm looking for, maybe great thought, which is ironic that I couldn't think of that.
Right.
But the House has really become the place for more negotiating these days.
Right.
So I don't know how that's going to change, because I think that the legislators that are still left in the Senate tend to be a little bit more burrowed into their sides. But again, with a smaller majority, there's less they can move through now. So he may have to work with Democrats more than he has to have before. And actually, I think that would be a good thing for all parties involved.
Okay, and Spencer?
Yeah, of course, the margins have shifted as well in the Senate as they did in the House. But we're still talking about Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick here. So he's still going to have that same leadership style. He's still going to be leading the charge. But I expect the issues he takes up will be a little different. We haven't seen his priorities this session as early as we did last session. So I expect this first week will really be the real time that we see that.
He certainly doesn't have the backing for the bills like immigration and anti-LGBT that he did 2 years ago. But again, focus on public education, focus on health care, focus on child protection services and all the terrible stories we've heard about over the past years. We might be able to see some progress.
Okay, and then guys, the last question. Governor Abbott has said property tax reform is a major priority. He wants to cap how much cities and counties can increase property taxes without an election at 2.5%. And last session, the House and Senate couldn't agree on 6 or 4%. So how likely is the governor going to get his way?
I think it's unlikely. I don't think he can get enough. He won't get support from Democrats. I don't think he can get enough support from Republicans. Problem is 2.5% barely even keeps up with the rate of inflation. So at this point, you're really starting to strangle the ability of cities to provide basic services to their communities. It's like people aren't looking to eliminate property taxes altogether. They just want some breathing room. And the way they're going to do that is with school finance reform. It starts and ends with school finance reform.
Okay, and Spencer?
Yeah, so it's a very common fiscal conservative trope, but I think that we have a spending problem and not a revenue problem. So I think, of course, we're going to figure out, again, in these early weeks where that budget is going to go. I mean, we do have a considerable amount of money to spend. We have an 8% up over the last 2 years. But yeah, I think we're going to figure out where that's spent. And yeah, I think we're going to bring down costs and figure it out.
All right. Well, Spencer and Ed, thank y'all so much for weighing in and providing such great insight for today's Face Off. Really appreciate it. And guys, we'll be right back.